They called her the easiest contract in the sector. Nobody checked their math. In the bounty hunting world, there's a classification system. Every target gets a threat rating, a number between 1 and 10 assigned by the guild based on species, physical capability, combat history, and known behavioral patterns. A rating of 1 means you send a single collector with a stun cuff and a transport pod. A rating of 10 means you don't take the contract. The girl had been rated a 1. She was human. That was apparently all the information anyone needed. Let me tell you about the Kethara Guild, because you need to understand who these hunters were before you understand what happened to them. The Kethara operated across 11 systems, 43 active collectors, each one selected through a brutal elimination process that took 3 years and ended with a live hunt on an uncharted predator world. They were not amateurs. They were not reckless. They were the most professional, most dangerous, most methodical bounty operation in the outer spiral. They had never lost a collector on a rating 1 contract. Not once. In 60 years of operation. The contract came through standard channels. Anonymous client, generous payout, clean parameters. 1 human female, age 26, last known location in the deep nebula cluster designated Vale 9. No known combat training listed. No weapons permits on record. No affiliations, no criminal history, no threat indicators of any kind. Just a name. Maravas. And a note at the bottom of the contract that the guild's senior collector, a veteran hunter named Dreth, almost didn't read because it was written in a dialect so old that most translation matrices flagged it as corrupted data. He ran it through a secondary matrix anyway. It translated to 4 words. Do not corner her. Dreth laughed. He assigned 2 collectors, Yeva and Torque, his best pair, a species match team that had closed 47 contracts together without a single complication. He told them to be back within 72 hours. They never came back at all. What happened in Vale 9 didn't stay in Vale 9. It traveled. The way only truly important information travels. Quietly, at first, passed between collectors in low voices at guild halls and transit stations, growing with each retelling not because anyone was exaggerating but because the truth was already larger than most people could comfortably hold. I'm going to tell you the whole truth. Not the version the Kethara Guild filed in their incident report, sanitized, clinical, stripped of everything that made it what it actually was. The real version. Starting with what Maravas was doing alone in the deep nebula, and why the person who hired the Kethara to find her had made the single most catastrophic mistake of their long and careful life. Mara wasn't lost. She wasn't hiding. She was waiting. And she had been waiting for a very, very long time. You need to understand one thing about humans before this story makes complete sense. Every other spacefaring species evolved in environments that shaped them toward one survival strategy. The Kethara's home world was a high-gravity predator planet. They evolved strength, aggression, pack tactic. The sovereignty evolved coordination and collective intelligence. The Vishari evolved speed and networked communication. Humans evolved something different. Something that doesn't show up on threat assessment matrices. Something that looks, from the outside, exactly like nothing. Until it doesn't. Maravas had been alone in Vale 9 for 11 months. No resupply. No communications. No extraction schedule. By every metric the guild used to assess human psychological stability, she should have been broken. Isolated. Desperate. She was none of those things. She had spent 11 months doing what humans do when you leave them completely alone in a dangerous environment with nothing but time and their own mind. She had learned the nebula. Every current. Every dead zone. Every sensor shadow and gravitational anomaly and visibility corridor. She knew Vale 9 the way you know your own heartbeat. And when Yeva and Torque's ship dropped out of transit and began their approach pattern, she knew exactly where they were before their own sensors had finished calibrating. The best hunters in the sector flew into Vale 9 like they owned it. They didn't own it. Someone else did. Yeva ran point on approach. That was always how they worked. She handled navigation and threat assessment while Torque managed communications and containment equipment. 47 contracts. Same rhythm every time. Efficient. Practiced. Automatic. That automaticity was going to cost them. Veil 9 was a dense nebula, ionized gas clouds and overlapping layers, visibility dropping to near zero beyond 400 meters, sensor range compromised by the constant electromagnetic interference that made the deep nebula clusters simultaneously useless for commercial traffic and perfect for anyone who didn't want to be found. Or anyone who wanted to choose exactly when and how they were found. Yeva noted the interference levels and adjusted her sensors to compensate. Standard procedure. She logged the visibility range, mapped the nearest stable corridor through the cloud density, and began plotting an approach vector toward the last known signal coordinate. She did not notice that the signal coordinates were positioned at the precise intersection of 3 overlapping sensor shadows. She did not notice because it looked like a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence. Mara had moved her beacon there herself, 6 days ago, when the first transit signature appeared at the edge of the nebula. A ghost ping, barely a flicker, the kind of thing that only registers if you've been watching the same patch of space long enough to know what normal looks like. Mara had been watching for 11 months. She'd seen the ping. She'd had 6 days to prepare. Torque picked up the life sign at 2 kilometers. Single human biosignature, stationary, located in a debris field cluster at the edge of the coordinate. He flagged it to Yeva without concern. Stationary target. Exactly where the contract said she'd be. Easy one, he said. Don't jinx it, Yeva replied. Old habit. Superstition dressed up as professionalism. She should have listened to the superstition. They brought the ship to 200 meters and deployed the scout drone, standard procedure for nebula extractions where ship navigation was unreliable. The drone pushed through the gas clouds on a direct line toward the biosignature, transmitting visual feed back to the cockpit display. The feed showed a figure. Small. Slight. Sitting on a flat rock shelf in the debris field with her knees pulled up and her arms resting loosely across them. Dark hair. Young face. Eyes closed. She looked like someone taking a nap at the edge of the universe. Torque actually laughed. Threat rating 1, he said. Guild got that right for once. Yeva was already calculating the stun radius. 1 pulse from the drone's compliance emitter. Non-lethal, standard issue, rated for human neurological thresholds, and the target would be unconscious for 4 hours. Clean extraction. Pod deployment. Back to Guild transit before the nebula's interference cycles peak. She activated the compliance emitter. It fired. The figure on the rock didn't fall. She opened her eyes. Torque's display froze for exactly 1 second as his brain refused to process what he was seeing. The compliance pulse had hit. He'd seen the emitter discharge. The biosignature readings confirmed direct contact. A pulse rated for human neurological thresholds at point-blank range should have dropped her instantly. She was looking directly at the drone camera. Not groggily. Not in pain. Not with the confused, struggling expression of someone fighting unconsciousness. With complete, awake, focused attention. Like she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Yeva, Torque said. I see it. Run it again. Yeva fired the compliance emitter a second time. Then a third. The figure on the rock tilted her head slightly. The particular head tilt of someone listening to a sound they find mildly interesting, and then she smiled. Not a frightened smile. Not a relieved smile. The smile of someone whose hypothesis has just been confirmed. She reached out one hand toward the drone, unhurried, almost gentle, and crushed the emitter housing with her bare fingers like it was made of dry clay. The feed cut to static. Torque pulled up her file again. Rapidly. Hands moving faster than professional comm usually allowed. Human female. Age 26. No combat training listed. No augmentation records. No genetic modification flags. No. He stopped. There was a secondary file appended to the contract. Small. Easily overlooked. Tagged with a classification marker he hadn't seen since his training rotations. He opened it. It was a medical record. Fragmentary. Sections redacted, dates removed, the issuing institution listed only as a code string that resolved to nothing in his database. But 3 words in the unredacted section stopped his breathing entirely. Project Perseverance Subject. He knew that name. Every collector in every guild across the outer spiral knew that name, the same way children know stories told to frighten them into good behavior. The same way soldiers know the names of battles that ended careers. Project Perseverance wasn't a rumor. It was a warning. And someone had sent them after one of its subjects with a threat rating of 1 and absolutely no explanation of what that actually meant. Yeva, he said, and his voice had changed completely. We need to leave. Right now. She was already reaching for the navigation console. Something hit the hull. Not an explosion. Not a weapon discharge. Something that landed. Deliberately. From outside. In a nebula with 0 visibility beyond 400 meters. From a target they'd last seen sitting on a rock 200 meters away with no visible propulsion, no suit thrusters, no equipment of any kind. They looked at each other. The hull groaned. There are moments in a hunter's life when the roles reverse. Most hunters never survive long enough to recognize the moment it happens. Yeva and Torque felt it in their bones before their minds caught up. The sound was wrong. That was the first thing. Not an impact. Impacts had a sharp, percussive quality, a burst of force concentrated in a single point. This was different. Distributed. Like something large pressing against the hull from multiple contact points simultaneously, finding purchase, settling its weight. Like something had landed on top of them, and decided to stay. Torque pulled up the exterior hull cameras. 4 feeds, 4 aft, port, starboard. 3 showed nothing but the swirling gray-green density of Veil 9's gas clouds pressing against the ship like a living thing. The 4th feed, dorsal, showed a hand. One hand, fingers spread, pressed flat against the hull plating directly above the cockpit. Perfectly still. Completely unprotected by any visible suit or equipment. In a nebula with an atmospheric composition that should have been immediately lethal to unprotected human biology. Torque's threat assessment matrix was running continuously in the background of his display. He watched it climb in real time as it processed the new data. Rating 1. Rating 3. Rating 6. It stopped at 8 and began flashing a warning indicator he'd never seen activate on a live contract before. Assessment incomplete. Insufficient threat parameters. The matrix couldn't finish the calculation. It had run out of scale. Talk to me, Yeva said. Her voice was professional. Controlled. The voice of someone who had survived 47 contracts by never letting fear make decisions for her. She's on the hull, Torque said. How? I don't know. Is she suited? No. Yeva's hands paused over the navigation console for exactly 1 second. That's not possible. I know. Human biology cannot survive unprotected nebula exposure. The ionization levels alone. I know, Yeva. She looked at the dorsal feed. At the hand pressed against the hull. Fingers relaxed. No tension in them. No urgency. The hand of someone resting comfortably. Project Perseverance, she said quietly. Torque pulled the fragmentary file back up and pushed it to her display. She read it in silence. He watched her expression move through several distinct phases. Skepticism, recalibration, something that wasn't quite fear but lived in the same neighborhood. Project Perseverance had begun 30 years ago in a classified Earth Defense Research Division. The premise, stripped of its scientific language, was straightforward. Humanity was expanding into space, and space was trying to kill humanity in 100 different ways simultaneously. Radiation, atmospheric toxins, gravitational extremes. Biological pathogens evolved in environments that made Earth look like a controlled laboratory. The question the project asked was simple. What if we stopped trying to protect humans from those things, and started building humans who didn't need protection. The answer had taken 22 years of research, 17 failed trial cohorts, and one final group of 12 subjects who had volunteered at ages ranging from 3 to 7, too young to understand what they were agreeing to and old enough that the modifications could integrate with developing neurology. Mara Voss was Subject 9, one of 4 survivors from the final cohort. What does she survive? Yeva asked. Torque had been reading ahead. He put the relevant section on her display without speaking. She read it. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. Outside, the hand on the hull hadn't moved. The list was not short. Vacuum exposure up to 40 seconds. Atmospheric toxins across a broad chemical spectrum, including the ionized compounds prevalent in deep nebula environments. Gravitational forces up to 4 times standard. Temperature ranges from -80 to 60 degrees without core function degradation. Cellular regeneration rates approximately 14 times baseline human. Sensory processing, auditory, visual, electromagnetic, enhanced to ranges that had no recorded equivalent in any catalogued biological species. And at the bottom of the list, one line that had been partially redacted, blacked out except for 6 words that remained visible. Proprioceptive spatial awareness at ranges exceeding. The rest was gone. But Torque understood the fragment. She could feel them. Not see. Not hear. Feel. Spatial awareness operating at ranges their sensors could barely match, processing positional data through some biological mechanism the researchers hadn't fully understood even while they were building it. She'd known they were coming before their sensors had finished calibrating on entry. She'd known their exact position in the debris field, their approach vector, their drone deployment sequence. She'd let the drone find her. She'd sat on that rock, eyes closed, and waited for them to come to her because she already knew exactly where they were and exactly what they were going to do. The compliance emitter. The secondary fire. The tertiary. She'd let them try it 3 times. Confirmation, Torque realized with a cold settling in his chest. She hadn't been waiting to be caught. She'd been running a test. We need to negotiate, Yeva said. It was the right call. Torque knew it immediately. You don't fight a rating 8 target in an enclosed ship with compromised sensors in a visibility 0 environment. You talk. You find the leverage point. You? The ship lurched. Not violently. Precisely. A single, controlled movement, the entire vessel shifting 40 degrees to port as though something had applied exactly calibrated force to the starboard hull and redirected them. Their navigation display spun. Their plotted exit vector, the corridor Yeva had mapped through the gas clouds on approach, was now behind them. She had turned their ship around. Without entering it, with her hands, Torque pulled up the hull stress readings. The plating where her hands had made contact showed compression marks consistent with a force load that should have required hydraulic equipment to generate. He looked at the dorsal camera again. The hand was gone. A face appeared at the cockpit viewport instead. Mara Voss, floating in the nebula without a suit, arms loose at her sides, completely relaxed in an environment that should have been dissolving her at a cellular level. She looked at them through the viewport with those calm, direct eyes. And she mouthed 2 words. Torque's translation implant processed them instantly. Get out. There's a difference between being brave and being unable to process danger fast enough to feel afraid. Yeva and Torque were brave. They were also, for the first time in 47 contracts, genuinely afraid. Those 2 things were about to collide. Yeva made the decision in 3 seconds flat. She punched the emergency thruster override, a last resort system that bypassed all navigation protocols and dumped 100% of the ship's propulsion capacity into a single directional burn. It was designed for collision avoidance. For the moment when something massive appeared in your path and thinking was too slow. The ship screamed forward. Through the viewport, Mara Voss didn't move. She watched the ship accelerate directly toward her with the same calm attention she'd given the compliance emitter. The expression of someone observing an experiment proceed exactly as predicted. At the last possible second, she moved. Not away. Not to the side. She caught the ship, both hands on the forward hull brace, fingers finding purchase on the reinforced strut housing, body absorbing the impact of a full emergency burn with a fluid backward motion that bled momentum the way water absorbs a stone, not stopping the force, redirecting it, converting the ship's forward velocity into a long, controlled arc that curved them back around to their original position as though Yeva had simply executed a very expensive turn. The thruster override burned out. The ship drifted to a stop, in the same place it had started. Torque's hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the console and waited for the shaking to stop. It didn't fully stop. He worked with it. Options, he said. We have one, Yeva said. Talk. Talk. Yeva opened the external comms channel with the particular careful deliberateness of someone defusing something. Mara Voss, she said. My name is Yeva. My partner is Torque. We are Kethara Guild collectors. We hold an active extraction contract for your retrieval. A pause. We are formally requesting negotiation. Silence on the channel for 11 seconds. Torque counted every one. Then a voice. Quiet. Unhurried. The voice of someone who had spent 11 months in a nebula alone and found the experience entirely adequate. I know who you are, Mara said. I've known since you entered the transit corridor at the nebula perimeter. Your ship has a Kethara drive signature. The ion trail ratio is distinctive. I've been tracking 3 of your guild's vessels in this sector for the past 6 weeks. Torque and Yeva looked at each other. 3 vessels. The guild had run 3 separate preliminary surveillance passes in this sector over the past 6 weeks. Standard pre-contract intelligence gathering, ghost runs, completely passive. They hadn't made contact. Hadn't used active sensors. Hadn't transmitted anything detectable. She'd felt them anyway. You ran the surveillance passes, Mara continued, confirming what they were thinking before they could ask. 4th week, 2nd week, and 1 week before your arrival today. The first pass was a single scout, Kethara standard. The second was 2 ships running parallel. You were building a picture. The third was 1 ship again but slower. More thorough. That one was you. She paused. You wanted to know the terrain before you committed. That's correct, Yeva said carefully. I wanted you to, Mara said. I needed you familiar enough with the approach vectors that you'd use the standard corridor. The one I'd prepared. Another pause. Shorter. Who hired you? Torque tensed. Client confidentiality was the foundation of guild operation. Break it once and no client ever contracts you again. It was non-negotiable protocol. He broke it without hesitation. Because something in her voice told him that the answer she was looking for was not going to change his situation for the worse. And that withholding it might. Anonymous client, he said. Routed through a sovereignty shell account. Payment in untraceable exchange currency. No direct contact. All parameters delivered through automated brief. Physical description of the contracting party? None available. The account was 7 layers deep, Mara said. Rotating authentication. Registered through a sovereignty administrative satellite in the Oran cluster. The satellite was decommissioned 14 months ago, but the account architecture was maintained through a legacy access loophole. She wasn't asking. She was confirming. You already know who hired you, Yeva said slowly. I've known for 8 months, Mara said. I've been building the evidence trail since before I came to Vale 9. The weight of that settled over the cockpit like a physical thing. She hadn't come to the nebula to hide. She'd come to build a case. And she'd needed the Kethara to come to her, not to capture her, but to confirm the final piece. An active extraction contract, traceable back through the account architecture to a source that would collapse under forensic analysis to a single identity. The person who'd tried to disappear her. Why us? Torque asked. Why let the guild find you? You could have tracked the account yourself. I needed the contract to be executed, she said simply. An attempted extraction is a legal instrument. It creates a documented record, guild logs, transit manifests, payment confirmation. Irrefutable chain of evidence admissible in sovereignty judicial proceedings. She paused. You're not my hunters, she said. Then what are we? Yeva asked. Witnesses, Mara said. The silence that followed had a different quality than the ones before it. Not the silence of fear or confusion. The silence of two very experienced hunters sitting inside a fundamentally altered understanding of every event since they'd accepted this contract. The easy paycheck. The rating 1 target sitting quietly in a debris field. The compliance emitter that didn't work. The hull landing. The ship redirect. None of it had been a confrontation. It had been a demonstration. Mara Voss had never been the prey in this scenario. She'd been the investigator. And she'd just needed the guild, the most professionally credible, most legally admissible, most unimpeachable source of documentation in 11 systems, to show up, attempt the extraction, and survive to file the report. The account, Torque said quietly. When we file our incident report, the failed extraction, the client account details, the contract parameters. It creates the legal instrument, Mara confirmed. Combined with the 8 months of evidence I've been compiling, communications intercepts, financial transfers, a personnel file I recovered from a station that officially doesn't exist, it's enough. Enough for what? Yeva asked. The answer came without drama, without anger, in the same quiet, unhurried voice she'd used for everything else. To put Director Kale Voss in front of a sovereignty tribunal, she said. Torque ran the name through his database. Kale Voss, Senior Director of Sovereignty Expansion Project. 30-year career. Decorated. Trusted. One of the 12 most powerful administrative figures in the outer spiral. And Torque's database returned one more result. Listed as next of kin on a Project Perseverance participant file. Father. Some stories end with a battle. Some end with a bullet. This one ended with something the Kethara Guild had never once been used for in 60 years of operation. The truth. Yeva opened the docking hatch herself. No stun cuffs. No containment pod. No compliance equipment of any kind. All of it felt not just unnecessary but faintly embarrassing now, the way a misunderstanding always feels worse in retrospect than it did in the moment. Mara came through the hatch the way she did everything, without hurry, without performance, without any apparent awareness that the two most decorated collectors in the Kethara Guild were watching her with the recalibrated attention of people who had fundamentally revised their understanding of what they were looking at. She was smaller than she'd seemed on the drone feed. That was the first thing Torque registered. Not a contradiction exactly, more a reminder that the things which carried the most weight rarely announced themselves with size. She was carrying a single bag. Worn. Practical. The kind of bag that had been everywhere and expected to go further. She looked at them both with those direct, unhurried eyes. Thank you for opening the hatch, she said. Thank you for not destroying our ship, Yeva replied. Something shifted at the corner of Mara's mouth. Not the cold confirmation smile from the drone feed. Something warmer. The smile of someone who had been completely alone for 11 months and found, unexpectedly, that she was glad to be in the presence of other living beings even if those beings had recently tried to stun her 3 times. The ship is fine, she said. I was careful. The forward hull brace disagrees, Torque said. The forward hull brace will buff out. She sat in the navigator's seat, Yeva's seat, offered without discussion, and pulled a data drive from her bag. Matte black. No markings. The kind of drive that was designed to look like nothing because what it contained was everything. She plugged it into the ship's secure transfer port and began walking them through it. 8 months of work. Torque had processed a lot of evidence files in his career. Contracts, surveillance records, financial documentation, witness testimonies. He knew what thorough looked like. He knew what meticulous looked like. He had never seen anything like this. The first layer was the financial architecture, 17 subsidiary accounts across 9 institutions in 6 systems, each one appearing legitimate in isolation, each one connecting to the next through transactions small enough to evade automated flagging. Alone, each account was invisible. Together, mapped with the patient precision of someone who had nothing but time and a biological spatial awareness that apparently extended to data structures as naturally as it extended to asteroid corridors, they formed an unambiguous picture. Kale Voss had been systematically liquidating the Project Perseverance research archive for 3 years. Not destroying it, selling it, piece by piece, to a buyer whose identity existed behind the same kind of layered account architecture as the extraction contract. A buyer who was not a sovereignty institution, not a coalition research body. Something private. Something that operated in the space between legal frameworks where oversight didn't reach. He sold the research, Yeva said. He sold the subjects, Mara corrected quietly. The research was just the packaging. She pulled up the second layer. Personnel files, the 4 surviving Project Perseverance subjects. Their locations, their current identities, the careful anonymous lives they'd built in the years since the project was officially terminated. Each file had a status tag. 3 of them read, acquired. Mara's read, pending. The silence in the cockpit was absolute. The other 3, Torque said. Gone, Mara said. Taken in the 18 months before I went to ground. I didn't know about each other. That was a project protocol, separation for security, but I felt the second one disappear. I can't explain it fully. We were modified from the same base template. There's a resonance. She said it the way you describe a physical sensation, not metaphor, not poetry. Fact. I felt her go quiet, she said. And I understood what it meant. She'd spent 2 months after that moment doing nothing. She told them this without shame or self-judgment, the particular honesty of someone who had made peace with their own history. 2 months of sitting with the knowledge that her father had sold 3 people who shared her biology, her modifications, her everything, to an unknown buyer for an unknown purpose. 2 months of understanding that she was next. 2 months of deciding what to do with that. I could have run, she said. Indefinitely. With my capabilities, there's no environment I can't survive. No pursuit I can't lose. But you didn't run, Yeva said. Running doesn't help them, Mara said simply. And it doesn't stop him. So she'd gone to Vale 9 instead. Built her evidence archive. Mapped the account architecture. Recovered the personnel files from the station that officially didn't exist. A 6-day operation that she described in 4 sentences with the brisk efficiency of someone summarizing a grocery run, while Torque's mind quietly processed the fact that the station in question was a classified sovereignty black site with security ratings that should have made it impenetrable. Should have. She'd waited for the guild to come because she needed witnesses who couldn't be dismissed. The Kethara's reputation for impartial documentation was its greatest professional asset and, in this moment, her greatest tactical one. A Project Perseverance subject claiming her father was selling human weapons research to an unknown buyer was a story. A Kethara Guild incident report, filed under oath, legally binding, attached to a failed extraction contract with a traceable client account, was evidence. You need us to file the report, Torque said. With full account details, she confirmed. And I need you to carry the drive to sovereignty judicial intake in the Oran cluster. Neutral ground. Out of my father's administrative reach. And you? Yeva asked. Mara looked at the data drive for a moment. I'm going to find the buyer, she said. Neither collector said anything immediately. Torque thought about 47 contracts. About the clean, bounded logic of extraction work, a target, a client, a delivery, a payment. The world organized into clear roles. He thought about the hand on the hull, the compliance emitter crushed like dry clay. The ship turned around by a person who weighed less than their containment equipment. He thought about 3 people gone quiet. He thought about a father who had looked at his daughter, at what she was, what she could survive, what she'd been built to endure, and seen a transaction. "We'll carry the drive," he said. Yeva looked at him. 1 second of silent communication. The shorthand of 47 contracts, of knowing someone well enough to read the whole sentence in a single glance. She nodded. "We'll carry the drive," she confirmed. "And Mara." She paused. Something in her expression that Torque recognized, the look of a collector stepping deliberately outside professional parameters for the first time in a long career. "When you find the buyer," Yeva said, "you can call us." Mara looked at them both for a long moment. Something moved through her expression, a whole sequence of things, arriving and departing too quickly to fully name. Surprise. Recalibration. Something quieter and deeper underneath that. She picked up her bag. Stood. "The contract," Torque said. "Technically it's still active. We're supposed to deliver you." "I know," she said. "We're going to file it as a failed extraction," he said. "Target non-compliant. Collectors determined further pursuit inadvisable." "That's accurate," she said. "It means we don't get paid." She looked at him steadily. "Neither does my father," she said. She left through the hatch the same way she'd entered. Without hurry. Without performance. At the threshold she paused. Not looking back, just pausing, the way you pause in a doorway when something needs to be said and you're deciding whether to say it. "The note at the bottom of the contract," she said. "The one in the old dialect." Torque went still. "Do not corner her." "You wrote it," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I needed you to come," she said. "But I needed you careful. Careful collectors make better witnesses than dead ones." She stepped through the hatch into the nebula. No suit. No thrusters. The gas clouds swallowed her in seconds, that gray-green density closing around her like water around a stone, leaving no trace, no disturbance, nothing to indicate she had ever been there at all. Torque stared at the empty hatch for a long moment. Then he closed it. Carefully. "File the report?" Yeva asked. "File the report," he said. The Kethara Guild incident report on the Mara Voss extraction attempt was filed 48 hours later at Sovereignty Judicial Intake in the Oran cluster. Standard format. Legally binding. Attached to a data drive containing 8 months of forensic financial documentation, recovered personnel files, and communications intercept. The account architecture collapsed under judicial analysis in 11 days. Director Kale Voss was arrested on the 14th day. The buyer, whose identity the collapsing architecture eventually revealed, was a private research consortium operating across 3 systems, funded by 6 sovereignty member states who had decided that waiting for humanity to share its research was taking too long. They hadn't counted on a human who had 11 months of patience, a biological spatial awareness that no threat matrix could fully quantify, and the particular quality that Project Perseverance's researchers had noted in their files but never fully understood. The quality they'd labeled clinically, in careful scientific language. Persistence. Not a weapon. Not a monster. Not an apex predator in the way the galaxy understood predators, with claws and speed and visible, legible violence. Something older than that. Something that had evolved in caves and on plains and in the long dark between stars, the quality of a species that had never once, in its entire history, accepted that a problem was unsolvable, that had looked at every environment that tried to kill it and learned the terrain instead, that had sat on a rock at the edge of the universe for 11 months, eyes closed, and waited, not because it had no other option, but because waiting was the right move, and humans, when they have decided on the right move, are the most patient things alive. 3 recovered. The buyer's facilities dismantled. 1 quiet girl from Vale, 9, moving through the galaxy without a destination filed anywhere. And 2 Kethara collectors who, when asked by guild leadership why they had declined payment and filed a failed extraction on what should have been the easiest contract of the season, gave an answer that became something of a legend in the guild halls of the Outer Spiral. "Threat rating 1, Torque said. "Guild got that wrong," Yeva said. "How wrong?" their senior collector asked. They looked at each other. The matrix ran out of numbers, Torque said. Nobody laughed. Nobody was supposed to. This is a Kethara Guild incident file. Case designation: Veil 9 extraction attempt. Status: closed. Threat reassessment. Pending, new parameters required. End of file.